and Pablo.
So the next three players, I had them in a different order originally, and I was struggling to really pick the order they're in, and I was wrong the first time. And originally I talked to Terra, and of course Terra disagreed with me, because he's a prick and he always disagrees with me. But I'd realised talking to him, I've got to rethink this, and I've got to listen to other people. And then you guys started talking a lot about old school players, new school players, because of my previous video. And you guys, so many of you were going down the area of skill, and I'm like, it's not all about skill, it's a team free for all, it doesn't work like that. And it was talking to Spiritz that really sorted my head out. And we talked about how he judges players. And we talked about singlers specifically of new school, how he would judge them. And he surprised me with how he judged them in the order he would put the singlers. And I'm not going to talk about the order that he put them in, but it's kind of his thought process behind it woke me up to kind of a better way of thinking. And it's the same thinking that I do with football and Counter-Strike when I judge those players. So the idea that I didn't apply it to the Jedi Knight was a bit silly, but it helped lead me to this. So number 5 is going to be Till. He's the biggest Hungarian legend, easily by far the best Hungarian player, and it's hard to explain how impactful he was at his prime. So we played them quite a bit back then when TUA was still relevant. It was me, Terra, plus a third. We had 3 or 4 different thirds. And each time we played against them, if we were on good form, like this is a good day for us, we're playing well, we had a chance to beat them. If we weren't on good form, it was done. Because Till's going to get you in the end. He's going to break your team, and coming back into the game is impossible, because you never get stable enough or comfortable enough to even start pressing back and start trying to get a comeback going. And he's just fucking terrifying when you're not on form. If we were all on form, yeah, we could fight back and we could slow him down a bit. But if you look back to our thirds, so a player called Config from Czech Republic, Staffer, a Polish player called Angel, Singler, Spiritz obviously, and then we had Hatcher, but he was like a replacement for Terra after a while. But all of those players, the whole job was to stop Till. Me and Terra will kill whatever singlers they have at the time, but you have to stop Till. That's the only chance we have. And Config wasn't a great player, but he was pretty decent staff for staff. Go get Till. If Till comes to us, you get him. Stand in between us and Till the entire match and don't let him at us, because he's a fucking pain in the ass and he's going to kill us. He's going to cause us way too much trouble. And we need a bit of time to be able to focus down these singlers. And when that was done, when we could do that, great. We'd probably win. And honestly, even though I know the players, if I look back at those games, I can't really remember anything about the singlers. I can only remember surviving or beating back Till, get away from me, fuck. Because I have a distinct memory of fighting Till on Free For All 2, and this is one of the ones we lost. And I just remember him coming for me. And I wasn't on form at the time, so my aim wasn't good and my ground was piss poor. And I couldn't stop him. And Till is at the top end of this with Q for sticking to you like glue. Holy shit, when he's on you, he is on you. He is not getting pushed back, he is sticking to you. And you might swing at him to push him, to get him to take a few steps back. But he's so good with his movement, and he's so good technically, and such a clean player that you can't really do much to slow him down. He's always going to be right back at you as soon as your swing's finished. And he's not someone that chases in the air as much as some other staffers, because a lot of the time he'll make the decision, oh, I want to stay on the ground. I want to be there when you land, so I can fuck you. And then you'll try and jump again, and I'll be on the ground right on your feet when you land again, and I'll fuck you. And it's just like, oh, hop, skip, and jump sort of tactics. Shit jump, shit jump, shit jump, and eventually he's going to kill you. And that's why you need to be on form, because if you're not on form, you can't get any space. He's going to get you. And Tutu is incredibly good technique, which doesn't really get talked about. He's a very clean player. He's not a big wiggler. If you watch him properly against good players when he's serious, he doesn't wiggle a lot. He hits really clean and powerfully against single. So he can break your stance. He can often break blocks, or he can cause blocks, force you to swing and then come in and kill you again. He's very, very good hitting you from range and coordinating his movement with his swings. And he's just got a very pure way of doing it. And it's absolutely fucking terrifying. To the point where when Spiritz was in TUA, and I know this was like Spiritz' first proper base team, so he doesn't. We got him to play completely differently to how you know Spiritz. We said, stay on the ground, deal with Till. Stop jumping around, Spiritz. Fucking stop that bullshit. Go deal with Till, because he's going to fucking kill us if you don't. And yeah, it worked. It absolutely worked. And then obviously later on, VP got S3, and it was like, now we need Hatcher. We need fucking 2 people to deal with this shit. This is getting bullshit here. Because if S3 is kind of fighting Spiritz, then who's fucking stopping that guy? That's how big of an impact he was, as far as I'm concerned. And I think at his absolute highest level, he is arguably the best staff versus single player. Just directly. Just absolutely in your face. Difficult to deal with as fuck. And I think that speaks huge about how good he was. To the point where, when we played him with Spiritz, a lot of the time, because he's not great against staff, he can't beat Spiritz in staff. Hands down, cannot. But he can kill singlers quicker than Spiritz can. And that was kind of the impact at his peak that he had. Can Spiritz make up for it and balance it out, or can we make up for it with Spiritz as singlers? And it was, they were great games. I really, really enjoyed those games. So why is he only 5th then? So he has 2 weaknesses. One, obviously the staff versus staff. Honestly, he's, in my experience, and I'm no staff technical person, you know, staff versus staff, but he's one of the weakest staff versus staff players on this list. And at the time, especially, TUA beat them a lot by just winning the staff battle, and that made a big impact. So if he can get, that's kind of one of the advantages of him having Borka, because Borka was very good staff versus staff. But if he can properly get space and time to go at singlers, I don't know if he's a better player, but against staff, he can be stopped. And the other weakness that he has, and I don't know him personally, so it's hard to judge this, but from the outside, he has a mental weakness. So he had his peak, and then he dropped off. And a lot of why he dropped off, in my opinion, is he just didn't give a shit anymore. He didn't care about winning as much as others, and he didn't have like that winning mentality that you'd associate with Spiritz, because it's an endless winning mentality. And there's definitely some ego in there, because, you know, the Hungarians, that whole culture in Jedi Knight has a lot of ego, and it meant basically he didn't win as much as he should have. And going back to that conversation I had with Spiritz, basically it comes down to, what's your ability to win as a team? And so you can name off really big skilled players, but if they don't win, it's irrelevant. But if a far less skilled player who's quiet wins games, he's a better team free-for-all player. Simple as that. So it comes down to the fact that, considering the players he played with, he had Borka, he had Razor, Tequila, S3, and even Danny. You should, like, that's the best team combination in there, best team on paper you could get in New School. But yet Spiritz' team beat them way more than they beat Spiritz' team. And Spiritz didn't team up with superstars. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the criticism at the end of the day. As amazing as he was, and one of those players that stuck in my head the most, he's beatable if you structure the team right and you play a solid game against him. I do remember watching the game, just to finish this off, of, I can't remember Spiritz' teammates, but I'm assuming it's Shador and maybe Tomok or someone, against Borka, Till, and I'm going to assume Razor. Oh, I could be wrong. But I think that it was something like that. And Spiritz, this is the most impressive game that I saw Spiritz do. This is where I knew he was like ridiculous, and there's no criticism of him I can really give, is that he managed that game. He stopped 2 staffers from getting to 2 singlers, which is ridiculous. He did it on his own, and he did it beating them off and beating them staff for staff, to the point where he had control of the game. He wasn't jumping around his usual style like he would with Shador and just like backstab and beat. too mobile. No, he was sticking really controlled, sticking to the ground more, and just beating them away, and then allowing his singlers to try and get into the game more. And he just kept pissing off the staffers. And then, you know, Borka does what Borka does, Rager starts to rush too much, dies, and Till starts doing the same a little bit. And it's just, that shouldn't happen. Borka plus Till should beat Spiritz and be able to get to those singlers and fuck them. Because there's no singlers really out there that can really beat Till properly when he's on form. Yeah, so, bit long that one, but yeah, on to the next one. So now we're on to number 4, and number 4 is going to be Despair. Now, Despair is a strange one, because compared to basically everyone on this list, or at least the vast majority of them, he wasn't good for very long, and unfortunately his competition wasn't as high as some other eras. Now, it was still a good era. It still had like Merlin at his prime, Miniar at his prime, Wonder at his prime, Icarus at his prime, and it had old Axiom and Zedai and Aiming and stuff like that, and some of the upcoming Hungarian players for the future. So it still had a lot of really good players, but compared to prime old school or the prime new school players, it wasn't quite as high. It was that middle ground. And even though still had plenty of good players and teams, and he was the best player of that era. Now, he started as an average dueler. I played him on 1v1 and smashed him. Oh yeah. Didn't play him as a staffer because I would have fucking lost. He switched to staff at some point. I don't know a lot about him when he started off. He was like an arrogant prick. And then he just got really good with staff, and he started winning big games and playing for big German teams. And at some point joined NL, No Limits, with Cube and S3. And he just suddenly started to become really amazing. And I remember, I think he was in a 2v2 team with Whitesnake that was really good. And when he got really good, he just never showed any arrogance. He didn't, as a crap player, Dick raged, whatever. But as a good player, I don't know, he got past it. Maybe he just had a chip on his shoulder when he wasn't winning, and he just needed to show that he could be good. But yeah, I didn't see any arrogance to him. He wasn't flaming anyone. He was being nice to people. So there was a big change there. And he basically had no weaknesses in terms of skills anyway. He was great first staff. He was great first single. He was great in the air. He was great on the ground. He could play fast. He could play slow. There was no real kind of like skill or technical weakness that he had. I can't think of anything that really got to him. Because as I say, he was the best player of his time. And I never saw him rage. I never saw him break mentally or anything, because he won over and over. And yeah, he did have a lot of good players on his teams, like the ones I mentioned with NL, and later on more with the Germans, Merlin and whatnot. But yeah, he was just the best player and enjoying his time. And his time got cut short. He was a semi-pro Counter-Strike Source player, and I think something happened IRL where he just left. And he left as number 1, the best player, and kind of after that, that was around about the time that like Duriel would leave, and a lot of Axiom players, and like Radonis was gone and whatever. And he left the number 1 player. And when that happens, it kind of always makes you remembering kind of positively. I'm gonna, compared to someone like me, and I've had lots of highs and lows, so you're always gonna know, well, he's had plenty of lows, he can be shit, 100%. But with Despair, he didn't really have that, so it sticks in your head that he was just fantastic. Anyway, the most unique thing about him was his technique, though. So he wasn't really a switch staffer; he was mainly non-switch, or completely non-switch. And the way he hit, technique-wise, was probably the cleanest player on this list that isn't a switch staffer. He was so clean. He was beautiful to watch, and that showed he had such great understanding of how to get power and damage out of his swings, and how he could aim them to get range and move with them properly. Because if you watch the demos of him, he's so effortless. He doesn't swing that much, and when he does, every swing feels like it's with purpose. And so he cuts out all the crap, all the waste, and so that makes him fast, and it makes him just efficient. And he's suddenly getting all these kills and making everyone look like they're idiots, because he's doing it clean. He's just aiming and nicely moving in coordination with his swings, and like it's almost like a dance for him. And he's just dishing players all over the place. He's just smashing them. And it's great to watch. It's one of the best frag videos that I like to watch, to be honest. And because of that, the staffers afterwards, a lot of them started to watch his demos and learn from it. And don't get me wrong, no one's perfectly got what he's got, or maybe others have improved on it, or made it so that it works better for them. But no one's been able to do what he did, and he had a big influence on how players hit. And I think that speaks volumes about him. Now we're on to number 3 now, so we're getting close to the end here. And number 3 is, and I reckon most of you probably guess, is going to be S3 Sect. He had the longest career of any staffer, and his consistency at keeping to the top level was amazing. He was, I knew him back when he was a singler at first, playing with someone called Shine in XIO, and he started playing with Cube, who taught him staff, and he quickly picked it up. And from very early on, this moved 2004, I'm guessing, ish, he picked up staff, and he was at the top level all until like new school, playing against Spiritz with Till and stuff, and playing in different lineups there. And he was always, towards the absolute top of all the players, basically. And that level of consistency is amazing. In terms of play, he has no weakness. And I know I said that about Despair, but with S3 it's a step up, because he's strong against single, he's strong against staff on duels, and he can play against block and wiggle well. He's good on the ground, he's good in the air, he can tank, he can do clean hits well, he has good technique, he can play defensive, he can play aggro, and on top of that he's also a really intelligent player. He had amazing teamwork, had a very high understanding of Team Free for All. I remember I teamed up with him on 2v2 Cup, and he was just really easy to play with, and every time you play with him it's just natural. One of those kind of old school players, a bit unlike a lot of the new school players, where he understands how to look, position and play with his teammates, and I think he's one of the best at that. And honestly, he's probably out of everyone maybe the most complete staffer. If not him, then it's one of the two above him, but you could argue that S3 is more complete. Honestly, I have no criticisms, no weaknesses to mention at all. So I'll just talk about kind of my memories of him and how he kind of played in the team. So memories of him, obviously, No Limits was the big one. VP, I think he played in 40S, yes he did, and stuff like that in the new school. And he had a 2v2 team with Dark, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or some bullshit. Anyway, all those teams were fantastic teams, very effective and successful. All those teams had a 2v2 team with Cube as well, obviously, and at one point they were the best 2v2 team in the world. At the end of the day, NL is, I'd say, in the top 3 biggest names in history, with like Axiom, and 03 is not as big as they are. Yeah, maybe it's just those two that are the 2 biggest. And he was one of the absolute most central parts of it. In all of the teams he played with, that I've mentioned at least, he wasn't the main front person, he was the middle guy. So he'd like a defender behind him and an attacker in front of him, which is the exact same that I do for my teams when I'm playing my favourite role. And that means that he helps out with attack and defence. He's incredibly flexible. He's able to pressure really well and just work in very, very different situations and teams. And he was successful with all of them, and it shows just how flexible he is. And yeah, it's a really short one. I don't know what else to say, because I've been competitive for so long, and it's kind of like there's no weakness that you really point to him and say, oh, that's how you're going to beat him. It's more of a full team versus full team thing. Can you be a better team than the enemy rather than look for specific weaknesses? Yeah. So yeah, that's S3. Absolutely amazing player. Now, coming on to number 2, with all the other players, I wrote out like a a light script of what I was going to say. But with this player, I'm kind of just going with bullet points, because in my mind I kind of have him glorified already, so I know within reason what I want to say. So number 2 is Q, and in terms of staffers, he is probably my favourite of all time. He's the one that I said was the best for the longest time. He is undoubtedly, in my opinion, the biggest legend. So when I first started in the game in base, I was in tffa, and I soon joined 03 when I started playing more serious. And at the time, NL didn't exist, like really early on. Instead, Poland really didn't have any big teams. They weren't really that big outside a handful of players, and most of those handful of players were 1v1 players and team free for all. But Cube led this team, and he wasn't a top player at the time in terms like as top as he was going to go. So he was like maybe like top 6, top 8 sort of player, and he was starting to get into his flow where he's making a name for himself and beating lots and lots of good players consistently. His team was at the time, I think, completely Polish, bunch of staffers, and his teammates were, especially compared to nowadays, really just meh. And they started to win against really good teams, and it was like, okay, 1 or 2 victories here and there, that's impressive, and it just became more consistent. And it was basically down to the fact that he was Poland. Polish CS, Jedi Knight was Q. It's what everyone thought. It's what everyone looked at. There were other good players. There was Frost, for example, who was a big legend. But who gives a fuck? Because there's Q, and this guy is beating the shit out of everyone. And I remember early on, one of the first cups I got to, where I started to place, I played against Radonis, and I beat him. And Radonis was just happy that he didn't have to play Cube after, and I did instead, because he was like, fuck that, I'm gonna lose. And yeah, I lost as well. He was starting to become terrified, and then he made NL. The top 2 biggest names as far as I'm concerned in the game, bigger than 03, bigger than VP, or whatever teams you want to think about, probably on par with Axiom. And he was NL. Even though NL had big names in like S3 and Despair, I mentioned before, they were his players. He was the big player, he was the name, he was the leader, he was what everyone thought of and went to deal with. Same with Poland, as I said before. And he was the forefront of absolutely everything. And then when NL came and they had S3 in it, and someone called, I think it was an Arcoid, Singular and stuff like that, and they started getting Evil in and Basti. Fuck, they became top 2 teams in the world for the next I don't know how many years, and he was terrifying. As far as any player goes, I mentioned Till. If it's not Till, then it's him as the most terrifying. And he beat the shit out of everyone. I remember that Star Aiming was the 2nd best German team of all time, who were in the top like 4 teams consistently. We beat NL somehow. Fucking pure luck. They didn't have S3 playing, so it was like a bit of a weaker lineup, but tffa beat them. And I remember Aiming all messaging me, how did you do it? How did you fight Cube? Because that's how important he was. No disrespect to the others, but we didn't talk about the others. It was, how do you stop Cube? Because he's aggressive as fuck. He was the type of player that once he builds up that momentum, he's unstoppable. He just starts pushing at you harder and harder and harder, because once he gets used to how you swing, how you move, he can break you. He's the type of staffer that will aim for your saber all the time, because he wants to break it. He wants to break your stance, he wants to break your swing, and then he just pushes you. And if you go for a crouch or anything like that, or to block him, he will break it, or he will force you to do a crouch block and then hit after it. He is just relentlessly on you. And because he's more tanky than Till, he's just that much more destructive. And he can play on the edge of your saber a bit better than Till because of that tank. Because if you do try and do something, he's ready for it. He's not dodging it as much as he's powering through it, because his technique is so focused on the destructive side of things rather than like the smooth side of things. It's just move, swing, bang. And out of all the staffers, he is the best at coordinating his swings and his movement. And it's something that I've not seen players do since. He would do like SD, SA, WA, WD moves, like diagonal moves back and forth while swinging so perfectly he basically lost no movement, no speed, but while being able to continually swing more often than most staffers can. And that meant that his speed was high and his destructive power was high. He was always ready to hit your saber, as I said before, or your stance or whatever you can get, your swing or whatever. And it's just this like orbiting fucking tank coming for you, just so destructive and terrifying. And so he just started to beat the shit out of everyone. And when S3 got better and better, NL just become unstoppable. And at the same time, he's winning 1v1 cup after 1v1 cup. Before Spiritz arrived, he had won the most cups. He was the most dominant player, consistently fucking getting into cups and doing well in both Poland and Europe. Unbelievable. And he just had a massive impact on the game. He just changed a game that was dominated by Germans to one that was slightly dominated by the UK for a period of time to just being dominated by him. And apart from Spiritz, I can't think of an individual who's done that the same way. And he just changed the game. And changed the game in terms of not like people copied him because they couldn't, but changed the game of like how people fought as staffers. Because in old Jedi Knight, staffers existed, but NL brought staffers to the front of being like, they're super important, they're super powerful. Your singlers are wrong. All your single only lineups, you're wrong. This is going to kick your ass. And they were right. And then when he left the game, it was a period where Warhammer and Centurial were the top of 2v2. I think we're around about top of 3v3 as well, and top of 1v1. And Warhammer was his prime arrogance. We're the best. I'm the best. I'm the fucking best. I'm probably the best ever. I finally win. And then Cube just destroys him in 2v2, 1v1, and Warhammer leaves very quickly after. And it wasn't close wins. This is absolutely one-sided slapping in the face. And Cube played for a little bit after that, but he stopped taking it so seriously because he just reached a level that no one else had. And he was the best of all time for a long time, really, a good few years, and like 5 years or something like that, until the number one spot, who we can all guess, came along. But what a player, what an absolute beast of a player. Definitely the one that scared players the most out of all players, scared players more than what number one did. He was just amazing. No weaknesses, best movement with swinging, great in the air, just kind of followed you like a fucking jumping tank. That's just my memory of it. Anyway, I think that's everything I can really say about him. He was just fucking ridiculous. And very much like Cube, I am doing this with little to no notes, though I have thought about what I'm going to say, so I kind of know it. We all know who the first one is. So, number one, best staffer in T3 of all time is Hellraiser. Great staffer, what a beast. Though I only really did 1v1 with staff, which I got a few victories against Hitachi and Berlin. We all know that if I went staff, I would have been fucking the best. But since I didn't use staff in T3 we have to unfortunately say that Spiritz is the best staffer and player of all time in T3. He... Well, looking back at the list of staffers on this list, you can see players that have really, really polished their technique, that have understood how blocking works, how to break blocks, how to move with your swings, how to hit cleanly and get the most power out of it and do really good damage without losing speed, how to understand how to force out blocks and stuff like that, and break stances and swings of the enemy to make yourself a tank but also mobile, and just how that's been harnessed over years and years of different styles with switch staff, normal staff, more jumpy staff, more ground staff. And Spiritz comes along and he says, fuck all that, I'm going to play without any technique whatsoever. I'm going to switch it up to sense at 100 and fucking wiggle and spin like a motherfucker. And Oh my fucking god. Unfortunately, he was fucking right. What a horrendous player to watch. What an absolute horrendous viewing spectacle he would be. If we were an esport, we would lose viewers when he played and sponsorships. Because what is that? He is literally a machine in terms of he's come to the game, ignored what everyone else does, and said, what will actually work if I stand back and then analyze everything? Do I need to play really, really well on the ground with movement? No. He can, I'm not saying he can't, but he doesn't focus on that. Do I have to have really, really good technique? No. I need to do damage. I need to be fast and mobile. And I need to be able to switch up my style depending on the opponent. So I need to have really, really good staff versus staff, number one. And I need to be quick as fuck. And he has the fastest reaction speed and the fastest kind of like mouse movement, obviously high sensitivity that the game's ever seen. And he can play with 100 sensitivity and be accurate while wiggling and spinning. It is unbelievable. It makes no sense that no one has ever been able to do it before or since, though people have tried. It is a mystery to all of us, especially us older ones that have been playing with skill and control and technique. Fuck it. I haven't got a clue how he does 90% of the shit he does. I ain't gonna pretend like I do. Absolute damage dealer. He came to base after playing, well, he came to 1.01 after playing 1.00, I believe, that's his past, really late on, and he was a singler. And I thought he could have been a very, very good singler. And TUA was the first team he came to because we're well known for helping new players out. And I decided to train him. God, you can hear the sigh in my voice. And it was, you know, he was never going to come out how I wanted. And he was just wiggly and spammy. I was like, that's not how the game's played. But he ignored. And I at least taught him how to play with teamwork and how to structure and how to understand what your role is in a team, which he carried on. And he started doing really well in TUA, and he was very, very young. And at some point he left, and he went and did what he wanted to do, and he started making teams with players that aren't as good as competition, but played how he wanted to, had the right mentality, had the right skill sets, and he just changed the game more than anyone else has. And I say change the game, as I say, no one can copy what he does, but change the game as in to say, this whole new way of playing came to the game, and we all have to learn how to play against it, because he's the best, and his teams are the best because he's the best. And no player has carried more than him. He played against number 3, number 5, number 8, and at some point number 9 as well, and 10. Beat them all. Beat all those best staffers in the world. The few on this list that he didn't play against, half of them weren't good against staff anyway, or particularly good, and he basically didn't play Cube and Despair. That's it. Fuck. He destroyed everyone. And he has a completely other side to him that loads of people don't know. He's a fantastic leader, on and off the pitch, or server. On the server, he will take full responsibility for his team. He will defend his singlers better than just about anyone ever will. He will go off fragging if it needs to be fragging. He will set up his teammates. He will be mobile, or he'll stay on the ground and be defensive. He will do whatever his team needs. And he will continually push his teammates to do better and to be confident and to play calm. And he's absolutely fantastic at it. And he's just such an inspirational player. I don't know much about playing with Cube or S3 in Despair or Till, but I can't imagine, and I've never seen them have the impact that he's had on his team players that they've had, and his ability just to defy all of the things in the game and say, no, you're wrong, this is how it should be, this is the best way of playing it. And the unfortunate thing is no one else can do it, and I think he will undoubtedly go down as the best of all time. No one will beat that. He is mentally maybe the best, strongest of all time. Just doesn't give up, doesn't rage, focuses. I mean, he's young, and that's a big part of it. But like, he doesn't break. And he's played against VP, who have or 40s or whoever it was at the time, who have had stacked lineups and beaten them quite a lot more than they've beaten him. And a lot of it is to do with mentality and the way that he leads his teams. He is horrible to fight against because it puts you in a position of you either focus on him or ignore him, and neither really works, because if you focus on him, he requires so much focus, as in you have to give him all your attention that other people will fuck you over. Or if you don't focus on him, he will eventually just get so much freedom he'll break you down. And it's kind of the only way to beat him is to structure your entire team to stop him and then think about killing some others. And I've said that about other players, but none to the level of Spiritz. And so, yeah. No weakness. Total prick. He's a good guy, and yeah. I can't relate to him in terms of style of play, obviously. And yeah, what else is there to say? He's been around forever and he's been winning forever. And he's not as good as he used to be. I was talking to him about that as well. He said that he's just not active. He plays for fun, but I still think he might be favourite to win this 3v3 Cup. And on paper, he's not got anywhere near the strongest team with him. So there. And I guess that's the end of my list. It's difficult to say anything else about any of them. I've enjoyed playing all of them. Staff is always one of the best challenges, and I used to really hate playing staff, but over time you get to really enjoy it. Really challenges you in a different way, and I think singlers need to step up to be able to play against them better. And I enjoyed making this list, and thank you all for watching it, and peace out.